So next question. Do you always want a slow rate of gain while in a muscle gaining period? And as an aside to that question, do women have to focus more on strength overload than caloric overload? So first of all, your rate of gain is going to be dependent on a couple of things. Your age, your gender, and your training age. Those are probably the most important thing. And how just genetically are you apt to be able to put on muscle. You know, you'll see a lot of muscle mags cite, you know, a pound a week is a great rate of gain. And I think a pound a week for most people is a great rate of gain if your goal is obesity. Which is a fine goal if you want to be obese. But honestly, you should only be putting on a pound a week if you are new to training and a teenager, taking something hormonal, or coming from a deconditioned state. Like if you were jacked and then hadn't worked out for 6 months, you could probably put on a pound a week and see some good progress. For your average mid-20s to late 20s, been in the gym a couple years, a lot of our audience male, I wouldn't go faster than half a pound a week, 3 pounds a month at most. And that's if you're going through a nice little spurt, everything's on point, or maybe your training wasn't so intelligent before, now it got better. Or you're coming off of a cut or something like that, you know, and you lost muscle. But in general, it's the rate of gain just needs to be realistic. And based upon how much muscle you can just synthesize and put on naturally, I like a good rate of 2 to 3 pounds a month for men in an intermediate stage, no faster than that. And in later stages, it's more about maintaining weight with a slow creep up and focusing on strength gains. For women, you basically have to take those rates and cut them in half. And for most women, I don't even focus on trying to gain weight. It's more about providing energy, getting a good relationship with training, food, recovery, and just seeing strength gains happen. And if the weight slowly goes up, you know, I think I had Barb, what, a pound a month? That was the goal. She's looking at me like I'm not allowed to speak about her. But, yeah, so I think our goal, and she was a relatively early intermediate, was consistent strength gains in a pound a month. So you don't want to take it fast, women, just because it won't go fast.
And here's a good example that kind of really put in perspective as to how much you have to overeat in order to make progress. Think about when you're dieting. You know, you recover. Might not be as fast as you typically recover, but you recover. So, you know, do you need those humongous amounts of food, those really big, that really big surplus? No, not necessarily. And like Eric said, it's going to depend a lot on the athlete's situation. Yeah, with women, typically we don't focus so much on weight gain. It's just recovering at a good pace, feeling good. And then another thing is, I also, and this is just me personally, I like to look at how the person holds on to body fat. And if you tend to be a little bit lower body fat dominant, I really don't want you gaining all that much at all, especially if you have competitive ambitions. That's why a guy like Jeff Alberts can, you know, shoot up 30 pounds, and I'm putting him on the spot, 30 pounds over contest weight, but you know what he does fine, because he doesn't tank and he loses fat very easily and holding on to strength at that. So,
and that's why I can't overeat.
And that's why Eric has to be about 15 and we start telling him, slow it down, dude. Yeah. So, every situation is a little different as far as how much weight gain, but I think most people really overshoot it and get a little carried away with just how big of a surplus they need.
Alright, so good questions. Got a couple more. Here's a good one about dieting. Even at a slight deficit, do you still want to refeed? And would it be less often than at a large deficit? Okay, so just to give you a little context, the idea here is that on some kind of regular frequency, often once a week, you have a high carb or high calorie day while you're dieting. And this is to prevent or at least slow down metabolic slowdown. You can time it with certain workouts that are more difficult. and it gives you a mental break from dieting. The mechanism, there's some argument over that, or whether it's leptin, or whether it's something else, or whether it's NEAT, or whatever, but I can tell from personal experimentation that if I don't have a refeed, even on a 500 calorie deficit, my metabolism slows down a lot faster than if I have it more frequently. And for me, a big refeed is necessary. I've done it a number of different ways, and what is the most effective for me is a moderate deficit with a very high refeed about once a week. And if I do that, I literally made 1 or 2 adjustments for the entire 8 months of prep. In 09, I had a couple moderate refeeds and then a more moderate deficit, and I literally made adjustments probably every other week for 9 months, and I finished eating 1,500 calories, and that sucked. But I got there. It happens. So it's going to depend on the person. For example, I know that Brad, before he started using refeeds, he got to be one of the leanest guys I've ever seen in my life and didn't have a refeed. And correct me if I'm wrong there, Brad. He's videotaping. He's nodding. So yeah. Jeff also has gotten into very great condition, not doing any refeeds. So it's dependent on the person. I think it depends on how adaptive the metabolism is, how swingy it is, and it also depends on the mental aspect of that person. And a lot of the changes we make are keeping the psychological perspective in mind. And you really can't just look at, biochemical stuff. Berto?
Yeah, right from where he left off. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, especially if we're not trying to get into contest shape, is really looking at the person where that psychologically. Some guys that don't need a refeed, and in 3 weeks we can get to their fat loss goals, and their metabolism isn't the type that tanks right away. Well, then that's what we're gonna go with. But there's other guys like Eric where we really need to do that, or we're gonna stall after the first week. So it really is a person-to-person basis. It's something you should experiment with, as far as not only what's most effective as far as your fat loss goals, what keeps you losing, but also what keeps your head on as well, which is very, very important when you're dieting.
Word. And
thank you guys, and Brad, you've been a wonderful tripod.
yeah. Brad, thank you. You're a great video cameraman.